The power of Buddhism, understanding the Four Noble Truths. Buddhism is a religion and a philosophy that has been around for thousands of years. It is based on the teachings of Siddhartha Gautama, also known as the Buddha, who lived in India more than 2,500 years ago. The Four Noble Truths are at the heart of Buddhist philosophy and are essential to understanding its core teachings. They were first taught by the Buddha in his first sermon after attaining enlightenment. They are: Dukkha, suffering exists. Samudaya, the cause of suffering is craving and attachment. Nirodha, there is an end to suffering. Magga, the path to the end of suffering is the Noble Eightfold Path. Dukkha, the first noble truth is the recognition that suffering exists. Suffering is a part of life, and no one can escape it. It can manifest in various ways, such as physical, emotional, and psychological pain. The Buddha taught that suffering is a universal experience that is inherent in the human condition. No matter how rich or powerful someone is, they will still experience suffering at some point in their lives. Samudaya, the second noble truth, explains the cause of suffering. The Buddha taught that the root cause of suffering is craving and attachment. Humans have a natural desire for pleasure and avoid pain. However, when we become attached to pleasurable experiences, we create a sense of longing and desire that can lead to suffering. The Buddha taught that craving and attachment are the causes of all suffering. Nirodha, the third noble truth, is the realization that there is an end to suffering. The Buddha taught that it is possible to overcome suffering and attain a state of peace and happiness. This state of peace is known as nirvana, which means extinction or blowing out. It is the extinguishing of craving and attachment, which leads to the cessation of suffering. Magga, the fourth noble truth, is the path to the end of suffering, which is the Noble Eightfold Path. This path consists of 8 steps that lead to the cessation of suffering. The 8 steps are: right understanding, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. The Noble Eightfold Path is not a linear path, but rather a set of guidelines that one can use to cultivate a more mindful and compassionate way of living. It is a path of self-discovery and self-improvement that leads to a state of peace and happiness. The Four Noble Truths are often referred to as the Four Seals of Buddhist philosophy. They are the fundamental teachings of Buddhism and form the basis for all other Buddhist teachings. Understanding the Four Noble Truths is essential to understanding Buddhist philosophy and its teachings. The first noble truth, dukkha, is often translated as suffering. However, the term dukkha has a broader meaning that encompasses all forms of dissatisfaction and unsatisfactoriness. Dukkha includes physical, emotional, and psychological pain. It also includes the inherent unsatisfactoriness of life, such as the impermanence of all things and the fact that everything is constantly changing. The recognition of dukkha is the first step on the path to enlightenment. By acknowledging the existence of suffering, we can begin to understand our own suffering and the suffering of others. We can develop compassion and empathy for others and work to alleviate their suffering. The second noble truth, samudaya, explains the cause of suffering. The Buddha taught that the root cause of suffering is craving and attachment. Craving is the desire for something we don't have, and attachment is the clinging to something we do have. These two factors create a cycle of desire, attachment, and suffering. Craving and attachment arise from our basic human nature. We seek pleasure and avoid pain. We want things to be a certain way, and when they aren't, we suffer. We become attached to the things we believe will bring us pleasure and try to avoid the things we think will cause us pain. However, the Buddha taught that this attachment and craving is the cause of our suffering. When we become attached to things, we create a sense of longing and desire that can lead to suffering. The more we cling to our desires, the more we suffer when we don't get what we want. The third noble truth, nirodha, is the realization that there is an end to suffering. The Buddha taught that it is possible to overcome suffering and attain a state of peace and happiness. This state of peace is known as nirvana, which means extinction or blowing out. Nirvana is not a physical place or a state of being. It is a state of mind that is free from craving, attachment, and suffering. It is a state of inner peace and happiness that can be attained through the practice of the Noble Eightfold Path. The fourth noble truth, Magga, is the path to the end of suffering. The Noble Eightfold Path is the path to the cessation of suffering. It consists of 8 steps that lead to the development of wisdom, ethical conduct, and mental discipline. These steps are: right understanding, understanding the 4 noble truths and the nature of reality. Right intent, developing the intention to follow the path and to cultivate compassion and mindfulness. Right speech, speaking truthfully and kindly, avoiding harmful speech. Right action, acting ethically, avoiding harmful actions. Right livelihood, earning a living in an ethical and responsible manner. Right effort, making a sustained effort to cultivate wholesome qualities and to overcome unwholesome tendencies. Right mindfulness, developing mindfulness and awareness of one's body, feelings, thoughts, and environment. Right concentration, developing the ability to concentrate the mind and to enter deeper states of meditation. The Noble Eightfold Path is not a linear path. One does not have to master one step before moving on to the next. Rather, it is a set of guidelines that one can use to cultivate a more mindful and compassionate way of living. The path is a practice that is developed over time through meditation, reflection, and ethical conduct. Understanding the 4 noble truths is essential to understanding Buddhist philosophy and its teachings. However, it is not only useful for those who practice Buddhism. The 4 noble truths can be applied to anyone's life, regardless of their religion or worldview. The recognition of dukkha, the first noble truth, can help us to develop empathy and compassion for others. When we understand that suffering is a universal experience, we can begin to understand and relate to others who are suffering. This can help us to be more kind and compassionate in our interactions with others. The second noble truth, samadhi, can help us to understand the root causes of our own suffering. When we become aware of our own craving and attachment, we can begin to let go of these desires and attachments. This can lead to a greater sense of peace and happiness in our lives. The third noble truth, nirodha, gives us hope that suffering can be overcome. This can be a powerful message for those who are going through difficult times. The realization that suffering is not permanent can give us the strength to keep going and to work towards a better future. The fourth noble truth, magga, offers a path to the cessation of suffering. The Noble Eightfold Path is not only a path to spiritual enlightenment but also a path to a more ethical and mindful way of living. By practicing the Eightfold Path, we can develop greater wisdom, compassion, and inner peace. In addition to these personal benefits, the 4 noble truths can also have wider social implications. When we recognize the universality of suffering, we are more likely to work towards social justice and equality. When we let go of our own desires and attachments, we are more likely to act in the interests of others. And when we cultivate greater mindfulness and awareness, we are more likely to make responsible and ethical decisions that benefit society as a whole. So, let's bring it all to a point. The 4 noble truths are a central teaching of Buddhism that offer a powerful message about the nature of suffering and the path to its cessation. By recognizing the universality of suffering, understanding the root causes of our own suffering, and practicing the Eightfold Path, we can develop greater wisdom, compassion, and inner peace. While the 4 noble truths are a foundational teaching of Buddhism, their message is not limited to Buddhist practitioners. They offer a powerful message that can be applied to anyone's life, regardless of their religion or worldview. By recognizing the universality of suffering, we can develop greater empathy and compassion for others. By letting go of our own desires and attachments, we can find greater peace and happiness in our own lives. And by practicing mindfulness and ethical conduct, we can make the world a better place for all. In today's world, where stress and suffering are so prevalent, the message of the Four Noble Truths is more relevant than ever. By understanding and practicing these teachings, we can not only find greater peace and happiness in our own lives but also work towards a more just and compassionate society. That's it for today's video. We hope you enjoyed learning about the power of Buddhism and the Four Noble Truths. Thanks for watching and see you next time.